One of the greatest and most famous catastrophes in human history is certainly the sinking of the Titanic, which at the time was the largest passenger ship in the world. According to the official version, the Titanic was supposed to sail to New York on its first voyage, since it sailed from the port of Southampton in England on April 12, 1912. But just 2 days later, on Sunday, April 14th at 11:40 p.m., it hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic, damaging the right side of the hull and water breaking into the ship. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the Titanic sank. The total number of passengers and crew members was 2,208, and between 1,502 and 1,523 people were killed. This is a play story, and everyone believed in it. So, even movies and series were made based on it.
You're now listening to A-Rod Music.
One of the theories, perhaps the most realistic, is that the Rothschilds, otherwise bankers, were one of the richest families advocating for the New World Order, wars, famine, and generally things to profit from. That they and other bankers, as well as the creator of the Titanic, J.P. Morgan, deliberately destroyed the ship because Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidor Straus, and John Astor, who were one of the richest people at the time, were on board. Probably not only these three were the targets because there were a lot of rich people on the Titanic, but the three opposed the Rothschilds and other bankers who wanted to create a World Bank and Federal Reserves. The official definition of the World Bank is to represent an international organization established to assist countries in progress and development. However, it is an organization of the big and rich with the aim of bringing under control the economies of all the independent countries that have no debt. Through false promises of the same progress, it is also for the purpose of the New World Order. The Federal Reserve is a kind of treasury, where America's money lies, and which enables the economic stability of that country. By the way, the Federal Reserve was formed the year after the Titanic sank. It can be said that this is enough to claim, but there are more strange events. In 1898, Morgan Robertson wrote a book called The Destruction of the Titan, the theme of which was about a luxury ship that acted as if it could not sink. The ship also went across the North Atlantic in April and hit an iceberg, where most people died due to the lack of lifeboats. It is interesting that this book was published 14 years before the Titanic crash, and it is strange that the author of this book was poisoned a few years after the crash. The question remains, did they get the idea in Robertson's book How to Kill who opposed the idea of the Federal Reserve? Also, Robertson's ship from the book was called the Titan. Another fact is that the founder of the Titanic, J.P. Morgan, was supposed to go on the voyage of the ship, but at the last minute he canceled the voyage. Also, his friend Milton Hershey canceled the voyage at the last moment. Interestingly, there were no red rockets on board that signaled a rescue call, but only white rockets on board that indicated that everything was fine. The Titanic was the first ship at the time that could electromagnetically close decks, so they could close people who were below it. There's also the theory that the Olympic ship sank, not the Titanic, because they looked a lot like each other. Allegedly, the Olympic collided with a naval ship a year earlier, where it suffered huge damage. The owners could not get enough money from the insurance to cover the costs, so they allegedly came up with this hellish plan. However, many remains from the ship that are not characteristic of the Olympic have been found, which confirm that it is Titanic.
There's no one that hasn't heard of RMS Titanic. The legend says that it was unsinkable, the biggest, the most luxurious ship in the world, but nevertheless sank, and this is real, causing the death of more than 1,500 people. There was a rumour saying that a cursed Egyptian mummy on board was the reason the ship sank. The cursed mummy went by the name of Princess Amun-Ra, aka Shipwrecker. Another myth described that one of the workers painted, "We defy God to sink her," on the stern of the ship. But legends around Titanic are countless. The most popular one is a theory that claims that the sinking of Titanic was in fact part of a huge insurance scam. Most people don't know that Titanic had two nearly identical sisters, Olympic and Britannic. According to this theory, the ship's operator and owner, White Star Line, tried to use the extreme similarity of Titanic and Olympic to fool the world, fool the passengers, fool the insurance company to claim a large sum of money. But is this even possible? Take a look. If you examine this footage from the British Pathy Archive, you'll think you're looking at Titanic. This footage has been used in countless films and documentaries which claim it to be of the legendary ship. But this is actually her older sister, Olympic, whose maiden voyage was in 1911. 1 year before Titanic's. The fact that this footage has been used to represent Titanic shows you how similar these two ships were. So the plan was to swap Titanic with Olympic. Passengers wouldn't have noticed that they were travelling on the sister. Switch the nameplate from Olympic to Titanic, get everyone aboard, make it appear as if the ship has accidentally hit an iceberg, and get everyone off the ship onto a passing vessel, the SS Californian, and then claim the insurance money without losing any lives. But what would have made White Star Line so desperate for money that they would have created such an intricate and fraudulent plan? Apparently, Olympic was not proving to be the cash cow ship of dreams she was meant to be. From the very start, she had electrical problems, and not long after her maiden voyage, she had a serious collision with the Royal Navy ship HMS Hawke. The damage caused by the incident was far more severe than White Star let on, and cost a great deal of money to repair. And because White Star Line's insurance policy didn't cover this eventuality, the costs were all borne by White Star. So the only way the company could make any more money out of Olympic was to sink her, having first changed her name to Titanic, which was heavily insured. So Titanic could thereafter be passed off as Olympic and carry passengers to and fro across the Atlantic without any technical problems and to great profit for decades to come. The Olympic, or possibly Titanic, would continue operating for a further 23 years before eventually being scrapped in 1935. Unfortunately, it seems that nothing went according to that plan, because 1,500 people lost their lives when the Californian failed to respond to Titanic's distress signals, and the White Star Line ended up paying out millions in compensation claims. But do we know this for a fact? Is this theory a real possibility? Is there enough evidence to dismantle it? Which ship is the one resting at the bottom of the sea?
I thought the lucky priest, Francis Brown, was the one that told the captain to sink the ship.
Yes, that's
Wasn't he the lucky priest that got off when
he's
they
the
went
lucky
back
priest
to?
that got off.
I mean,
exactly. That's
he
right.
got off the ship and he gave instructions to the captain to
Yes.
sink the Titanic. And why did they sink the Titanic, Lenny?
Because three of the richest and most important men in the world, Guggenheim, Strauss, and who's head of the Macy's department store, and John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest man in the world, blocked the Vatican Bank's takeover of the American banking system.
Those three men were worth $500 million
At the time.
and that would have been like billions and billions in this era. I mean, They were so wealthy. So their families were wiped out, basically, on that ship.
Yeah, the J.P. Morgan, as it says in the book, Bill Hughes's book, J.P. Morgan was ordered, and substantiated by other writers, Eric Phelps, etc. J.P. Morgan was ordered by the Jesuits to build the Titanic. This unsinkable ship would serve as the death ship for those who opposed the Jesuit plan for a Federal Reserve System. So, and of course, Eustace Mullins, we had an interview. Sherman and I did a number of shows with him, and of course he was a student of Ezra Pound's, and Pound was thrown in jail by the Warburg family because he knew that the Fed was a private bank and not owned by the people. So they threw him in jail. They wouldn't let him speak to a lawyer.
Well, you know, it's all out in the open now, but there's no money left anyway, so they just keep printing more, don't they, those families? I mean, it's called a Federal Reserve note.
Really is here, the new Assyrians.
It's absolutely
right,
here, isn't it?
We're watching the making of a new Assyria in Europe, and a new modernized Assyria decked with dictators and a Caesar, and a modernized Babylon is also being constructed right before our eyes, and that's why all that money is going to Baghdad, and all that money is going into the war effort. They're rebuilding Baghdad now.
Well,
the Babylon and the Pergamum.
It's in Berlin in the Pergamon Museum, and they've reconstructed the gates, and basically all of Babylon.
Now,
I mean, most of the walls.
Those gates back to Babylon?
They probably will move them back, but they're rebuilding it now. And I do recall that several months ago I stated that it was being built off-site.
Isn't this what?
So isn't it being built off-site?
Yeah, isn't this what Dubai is all about?
Exactly.
This is the lightning rod for how they're financing this new Babylon there. In Babylon, the old Baghdad.
Yeah, it's the old Baghdad.
You know, the old Baghdad.
They're taking bags of money there.
Well, we've told the Fed moved a printing press there. They've moved the printing press. They've got a printing press that they print American money from in Baghdad. So that's the next step to build the Babylon system.